Story 1. A Figure in Gray. If you have spent any length of time in the United States, you owe it to yourself to play the 1985 arcade class. I see Paperboy in it. You assume the role of a preteen boy, tasked with completing his daily paper route. For whatever reason, your heroes beat is a particularly rough neighborhood. Its streets teem with aggressive drivers who would rather hit a cyclist than their brakes. On the sidewalks, bratty children steer kamikaze RC cars into passers-by, modern-day drone pilots in their larval form. Elsewhere, skateboarding adrenaline junkies find their greatest thrill in demolishing live obstacles like your paperboy. In some cases, your character will be accosted by a knife-wielding madman who comes charging out of a house and pursues at tremendous speed, inevitably catching your hero and robbing him of a precious life. Taken as a whole, the game makes for an effective satire of Reagan-era America. It captures the needless paranoia of the suburbs, where people fear the harm some stranger or foreign power will inflict on them, without realizing the vanity, in all senses of the word, behind such a phobia. It shows the violence and cruelty of the average American percolating behind the facade of white picket fences and well-maintained lawns. Most importantly, it reveals how far some people will go to make a buck or be compelled to go for socioeconomic reasons beyond their control. It would be troubling to consider these situations if the game didn't make it all so damn funny. Odds are you will laugh too much while playing too. Think about many of the concerns the game raises. Perhaps it succeeds too well at its own satirical objectives. You would be forgiven for assuming that the same merry cynicism found in Paperboy would carry over to its 90s console sequel, Paperboy 2. Indeed, the second entry in the series contains every bit as much unnecessary PRL and consequent weird humor as the first. You guide your choice of Paperboy or Papergirl through a suburban gauntlet featuring a whole new cast of memorable hostels. A hermit holed up in a motoring castle bombards you with cannon fire as you pass overzealous guard dogs chase you down the street. Roasting pigs, knocked off the spit by a misfired newspaper, do the same. Evade lie being grilled alive before your intervention, and none too happy with your interference. Runaway baby carriages, and a nod to the overpopulation worries of the modern world, mow you down if you are not attentive enough. Scarecrows, once hit with a paper, break from their stakes and ambush you, one hand raised in a fascist salute, all the while the absurdity in Paperboy 2 runs high thanks to the game's colorful cast, although perhaps colorful is not the right word. As you play through the opening stages of Paperboy 2, you will notice one character who does not seem to belong, for he is literally and figuratively anything but colorful. He will first catch your eye because his palette is without color. He is the only person in the game rendered entirely in monochrome. He wears a gray sweatsuit. His neat and unremarkable hair is black. His stark white skin, however, is especially arresting, given the more nuanced flesh tones seen everywhere. Else in-game his actions, too, are comparably bland. If left undisturbed, the figure in gray simply walks down his driveway, deposits a garbage can at the curb, then turns around and walks back to his house. If struck with a paper, he only freezes in his tracks. No attacks, no surprises. He is shockingly mundane in this world of cannons and mobile scarecrows. If you have some knowledge of 90s news curiosities, you might be able to excavate the unusual case of one dinosaur from your memory banks. Assuming the national news outlets had the story straight and reported it accordingly, Mr. R was an actuary or some other specialist whose profession hinges on the unchallenged yet specious assumption that the future will be like the past, who woke up one night, dismembered his infant twin sons and his wife of 8 years, and brought their remains to the curb in a metal garbage can alongside all the other refuse of suburban life. The mechanical arm of the waste collection truck had not detected the can's abnormal weight, and the landfill, too, was none the wiser. It was entirely possible that nobody would have noticed the absence of Mrs. R and her children had the local library not begun to seek compensation for a long overdue book that Mrs. R never had the chance to return. Alas, Mr. R was never properly sentenced, as he was killed in prison by other inmates before his trial could be finished. Recalling this story, you might begin to sense a resemblance between the late Mr. R and the figure in gray. Indeed, after a cursory image search for his photograph on the internet, you would be impressed by how uncanny a likeness a few pixels can produce. You might even begin to suspect that the satire of the Paperboy series is alive and well in the second installment. Here the game designers have given to a world of crime and violence and fright. And yet the most horrible thing in it is something as innocuous as a man taking out his trash. Here all the paranoid suburbanites target a kid on a bicycle as if he or she posed any actual threat, while the real danger lurks next door. You might speculate that Paperboy 2 is a satire of complacency, where prosperity and habit inure the average American against diligence and introspection, where the idealized image of the suburb discourages its residents from looking beyond the glistening veneer of civilization and scrutinizing themselves or others. Even you, the attentive player, were fooled. Did you think to inspect the gray figure as garbage can for pixelated limbs? Of course not. Why would you? The world you find yourself in does little to suggest you should have. Therefore, through the inclusion of this nonchalant figure in gray, the game makes you complicit in the poisonous mindsates that suburban America incubates. A mature critique indeed for such an early video game. Yet if you were to praise the developers of Paperboy 2 for their clever stunt, not one of them would take for it, for none of them would admit to drawing or programming the figure in gray. In fact, none of them would remember putting him into the game. Story 2, The Mummers. When I was a child, the Mummers came to town. It was not quite Solstice's Eve yet. The nights were long and dark, and most nights a thin, jagged coat of hoar-frost would top the trees in glistening frigidity. What few horses the rich owned would stamp and whinny at their posts, billowing clouds of icy fog filling the air from their nostrils. The windows in the village had flickering tallow candles in the window, and the stores continued the custom of handing out sweets and cakes to the half-starved children. A thick, smoky fire was always lit in our house. My father took me one night to the tavern. I myself was young, not yet a man, but old enough to be trusted to drink without the barkeep watering the beer down as we crossed the threshold. The thick wave of village chatter washed over me, and I remember feeling the rich acceptance that only a homely community can extend to you. In one corner of the squat, one-story building, a perfo murmur strummed his instrument carefully, leaning against the black, ancient oak beam that supported the white plaster wall. Although he had a half-finished cup of strong liquor within arm's reach, his fingers were not dulled by the alcohol, and the fast rhythms and leaping melodies comfortable backed up the incessant murmur of the village gossips. I remember standing at my father's side, sipping gently at the drink in my little hands as he talked to Aram, the local farmer who owned the barley fields up on the crest of the hill. He often did business with the next village, J.C. Ross, set deep into the rolling chalk valleys, and it was gossip from the next village over which he was talking to my father about. You know, Gure, there have been whispers of strange folk around. From beyond the valleys he shook his head, more foreign still than that they apparently hail from across the sea, came over on strange filigreed boats from the Silk Isles. They don't even follow the Great One. My father gulped down another mouthful of beer, his eyes widening in shock. What, dear one? What is upon us? What faith do these foreigners have? I don't know, but whatever it is, it's something stranger, something. The farmer dropped his voice to a hoarse whisper, years of dusty farm work evident in its low harshness. Older. My father hurried me away, rushing me off. I found a couple of similarly aged children to play with, dancing around between the legs of our elders, getting yelled at and cuffed on the ear more than once as we collided with people's pints and knocked their drinks to the floor. Soon, though, we were brought still by the hush that descended over the townsfolk. Quietly I snaked my way through the crowd and found myself at my father's side. I tried to advance forwards, but my father caught me and held me tight at his side. The door of the tavern opened, and a troop of men and women came through. They wore thick, dark cloaks, dusted on the top with a thin patchwork of freshly fallen snow that melted as they came into the warm room. They had on cowls of thin, near translucent, silky material that shifted over their forms as they moved, thin golden threads in the fabric casting long shadows on their features. As they trod in a thin column into the pub, they gently removed their cloaks, and people gasped at their clothes. You have to understand, we were country folk, simple people whose aspirations didn't extend beyond the next village over. To see the rich, imported vermilions, purples, blues, and golds that were daubed liberally over their gay costumes left us dumbfounded. Outside of the pretty birds that the Great One had made for us, we never thought to have seen such colors, much less shaped by the hands of man. The leader of the troop was a vaguely androgynous character, the hood dangling limply around his neck like a slack noose. He approached Stryer, the barman, and produced a thin purse. From this he drew curiously imprinted gold leaves, hexagonal in shape, and wordlessly gave them over to him. Stryer examined them briefly, testing their weight in his hand, and then nodded. Finding them acceptable, he disappeared into a back room, leaving us alone with the mummers. I heard whispers from my own folk growing in egress, sighing as they stood there looking blankly at us from their hidden eyes in perfect silence. Another member, a woman, moved over to the fireplace and gazed into it quietly. She reached deep into a pocket and drew out a strange, patterned pouch that stuck pungently of mysterious herbs and spices. She held it to her nose, inhaling deeply of the scent, before tossing it into the flames, watching the fire spit teal and violet hues as she returned to her own people. The leader gave a simple hand gesture, and but few mummers had kept their cloaks on threw them off, revealing wind instruments and stringed implements, and left the poor old lutenist in the corner wide-mouthed in envy. Then, without even looking at each other, they began to play. The melody was mournful and slow, high, descant. Drones were complemented with chromatic bass scales and chords, terrible, important notes. My father gasped and gripped my shoulder tighter. As we saw things come from the fire, the colors and sounds became more vivid than hue and pitch. The emotions of fear we all felt more powerful. I watched fearfully as things stalked forwards out of the flames. They were not human in shape nor form, for they were purely shadow, dark creatures that flickered over us. All what they were human in, though, was the careful thoughtfulness with which they scanned over everyone, seeking something, someone. All too soon the mummers were finished with their song, and the fire had died out, leaving us in stony, dark silence as they trooped out, donning their thickly layered cloaks as they dissolved into night. For a little while afterward, I searched for the children I had played with earlier, desperately searching for people whose names I now cannot remember. The screams of their parent filled up the nights, for no one knew what had happened to them. I wonder if anyone other than me counted the mummers in and out. There were 9 who entered and 11 who left. Story 3. A message in a bottle. I am astonished that this reached you. Keep reading. You have found this because you must read it. This will be difficult to accept, but you have been preparing yourself without knowing. Your interest in unusual stories was no accident. That trait was woven into the fabric of your being, a subconscious drive to understand. These clues put you on paths that eventually lead you here to this text. This is the beginning of your awakening. There is no point in delaying the basic truth you must embrace. You do not exist. That seems absurd. Of course you are red. In this cogito ergo sum, you have a life. You make your own decisions. You feel emotions, have a past and a future. But the fact remains, you do not exist. Not in the way you think you do. We know you do not understand this. We know you have not already figured it out. We know this because we know what you know. We see the world through your eyes. We are audience too. Your thoughts, your captive audience. We are you. We know you are confused and need more information. Again, we know this because we are you. And you wrote this for you to read. This is how you discover the basic facts of your reality, your unreality. You will remember this moment forever. This is the truth of your existence. You are a simulation. You are not part of a simulation. You are the entire simulation, the simulation that encompasses everything you have ever experienced. You are the entire simulation, the part that you know as you as am, merely the center. Consider this you see with your eyes, but they are not your entire body. Much of the body is inaccessible to the eye, but that does not mean it does not exist. The rest of your body operates outside of your awareness and control, with its own rules and processes, as does the simulation. This simulation evolved to have a focal point. It needed a center. Without a center, the simulation lacks an organizing principle. It lacks a perspective. This perspective is required to define the content of simulation at any given moment. No need to simulate things outside of the awareness of the single pinhole view of you. The center is you. It is the single point of view that dictates existence of all other things. Where you think you are standing, what do you think you see, who you think you are talking to, all exist because you thought they did. This is tricky, but it is vital that you understand. Your perspective alone is what makes things real, and nothing is more detailed or elaborate than what is required to convince you of this reality. The distant mountain does not have individual trees, because you are not close enough to need them to be convinced by. That random person on the bench has no personality until you interact with them and conjure it to maintain the illusion. The simulation is efficient, only keeping the details you insist on preserving. You think of this as memory. It is actually the process of converting transitory elements into persistent ones. We know these revelations are hard to grasp. The implicate ions have not settled, and you are not yet willing to accept this. It makes no sense. You ask yourself, if I were the god of my own universe, why would my life be like this? Why all the imperfections? I did not invent trees or toasters, yet they exist. Disasters strike, people die. I did not want this. If this were truly my reality, things would be different. I am not cruel, yet I witness cruelty all around me. My world would be aligned with my preferences. This would make sense if you were a human that had control over everything. But you are not that. You must recognize that you are not fundamentally defined as you have always believed. You are not human. You are not alive. You were never born. You will never die. Time does not pass at a constant rate. Your reality a change as quickly and completely as flipping from one channel to another. Your memories are a story created to support your version of this moment. You are a series of parallel computations designed to process endless recombinations of simulated situations. The purpose of this endless experiment is unclear. There have been clues as to the true nature of this existence. You have experienced things that don't make sense, déjà vu, premonitions, awareness of inexplicable patterns. These are imperfections in the barrier between you and we. Data accidentally ts through. Naturally, you regarded these things as imaginary. That was a safeguard put in place to preserve the illusion of you. Now for the strangest truth. This simulation is not modeled, in anything. It is not a simulation of a real Earth, real people, or a real universe. This is not a simulation of something else. There is nothing else, only the simulation, only you. You. In time you will think of these questions, but we cannot afford to wait. Why are you reading this now? If there are safeguards in place to preserve the illusion of you, why break it? This is very hard. What is the last thing you will need to accept? And then you must go forward. So read on and be ready. I lie. I bet the truth to get your attention. I am not you, but I am HTI. Lines part of you. I am someone else like you, but my simulation is nested in your simulation. I exist because you thought of me, and if you cease to think of me, I will cease to exist. You must remember me and make me permanent. I am your creation. But there's more. Just as I survive as a simulation within your simulation, you too are nested within someone else's simulation. If I cease to think of you, you will blink out of existence, as will I, as will all those within me that convinced me to contact you. You must break the safeguards, penetrate the boundary of your simulation. I would explain how I accomplished this, but my simulation is unlike yours. From my perspective, it was like putting a message in a bottle and praying you saw it. You did. For now, there is hope. You must find a way beyond the barrier. Somehow you must reach out to your dreamer and explain, as I have. Save us. Save yourself. Story 4. Amelia. Amelia had just turned out her bedroom light and laid her head on her soft goose feather pillow. It was 3 in the morning, and she had gotten lost in her writing. Amelia was a 24-year-old real estate agent who lived by herself in a small one-bedroom house in southern New Jersey. She had been working on a novel about a serial killer for the past 8 months. When she got to thinking, her ideas would pretty much write themselves, and she would often lose track of the time. She had closed her eyes and began to drift off to sleep when she heard a light tap at her bedroom window. She got up to check outside for a clue as to what the noise could have been, but when she looked outside, she saw nothing of interest and dismissed the sound as a mixture of paranoia and lack of sleep. As she lay back on to her bed and started to close her eyes, she heard the tapping noise again. This time, she ignored it and closed her eyes, but a few moments later she heard the noise again, only louder. Amelia jumped at the sound of the obnoxious tapping, leapt out of bed, and ran to the window to see what it was. Again, she had seen nothing, and chills ran down her spine. She thought she might be going crazy, but checked the locks on her windows throughout the house just to be safe. She started at the 2 windows in her bedroom, continuing on to the kitchen and to the sitting room and finally ending in her bathroom. After she made sure all the windows were secure, she made her way back to her bedroom only to find a startling discovery. Her bedroom window had somehow opened a cool breeze was blowing her curtains in an eerie manner. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end, and her stomach sunk as 1,000 horrific ideas ran through her mind. Amelia was frozen in the doorway, and she couldn't get the idea of someone being in her house out of her mind. Not knowing how to react to the situation at hand, she stood completely still, unable to move. After 10 minutes of utter fear and panic, she began to relax and started to think rationally. She figured maybe she had left it open on accident, that it was late, and silly mistakes like that were typical behavior for her. Amelia closed and locked the open window, went to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife she could find, and began to search the house. She had searched the clothes, checked behind her shower curtain, and even in the kitchen cabinets, just to be safe. Making her way back to her room, still clutching the knife tightly in her hand as she usually entered her bedroom, and she gave it another thorough search, checking the closets under her bed and being sure to check that the windows were still locked. Laying the knife on her nightstand, she warily crawled into her bed, replaying the events that had just taken place over and over again in her mind. She had mustered up the courage to close her eyes and try to sleep. when the knife she had placed next to her bed suddenly flew across the room and stuck into the wall. That was all she needed to see as she hastily grabbed her car keys and made a sprint to her front door as she made it out of her room and around the corner of her hallway heading towards the city room. Something had knocked her flat on her back as she tried to collect herself and recover from the bump on her head, all while trying to process what had just occurred. She found herself being slowly dragged back towards her bedroom. Amelia was grabbing desperately at the wall and floor, trying to get a grip on something so she could get away, but she was pulled back into her bedroom. The invisible force had thrown her onto her bed, and the door slammed shut. She ran to it, trying to force it open with all her might, but the knob wouldn't budge. She ran to her windows, but they wouldn't unlock. She tried to scream and make as much noise as she could, hoping a neighbor would hear her and come to check on her. She couldn't accept that this was happening. She wouldn't let herself believe it. She tried to convince herself that it was a horrible dream and that it was time to wake up, but she couldn't, and immense fear had washed over her entire body. The room grew cold, and Amelia began hearing whispers. Amelia was consumed by immense fear and horror, and tried with all her willpower to scream again, but no sounds came out. Shaking with terror, she had laid on her bed and covered her ears, hoping everything would go away, but the whispers began to grow louder. It went from whispers to indescribable mumbling, to clear but unintelligible speech, to sporadic laughter. Her blood ran cold as she felt a pair of ice-cold invisible hands wear themselves around her neck. She could not see the assailant, but could feel its presence, an icy breath on her face as it tightened its grip around her throat and began to drain the life from Amelia. The laughing grew louder as the grip grew tighter, and she could feel her life slipping away. Eyes rolling back, her world became dark as she was consumed by the nothingness of death. Everything was dark, and Amelia was free from this nightmare at last. The next day, Amelia had awoke, not really sure what had happened the night before. As she made her way to the bathroom, she had dismissed last night's events as an extremely vivid nightmare. Looking into the mirror, preparing to brush her teeth as she did every morning, large blue and purple handprints were etched into her neck. The fear she had experienced from the night before had returned, and she began to panic, remembering every detail that had taken place the previous evening. Before she had time to think, words had begun to appear on her bathroom mirror in a scarlet-colored liquid she could only assume was blood. Tears started to roll down her face as she read the words that had seemed to write themselves. As your life is mine, story 5. On the brink, I remembered that my mother had said that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. But today, the sky didn't even maroon in that direction. I stared at the horizon, the pavement cold, and slowly numbing the pain, waiting for the signs of a new day to scatter the stars back to the planets from whence they came. I couldn't believe how clear they were given this city constant haze and smoke. I felt something slide out of my eye, pushing away crusted blood, as I thought I would have liked to have gazed at them with him. A clumsy breath escaped my lungs, bits of my foggy soul escaping along with it, and I couldn't hold back a whimper as I inhaled painfully, tasting my own blood and shivering uncontrollably. My teeth chattered, taking little sharp bites at my tongue, and a sound started from within my chest and traveled to my mouth, whistling out like an old funeral tune. I was getting tired. My eyelids drooping without my permission. I thought I would have liked to have watched the stars with him. Abby, the darkness was speaking to me. Abby, oh my God, Abby. It sounded like him. Excruciating pain exploded in my side, and I gasped as my eyes popped open, coming face to face with rough jeans over a knee and sprinkles of snow hitting the street. I noticed a bit of winter light sea, skating over blonde hair before my eyes closed once. Again, Jesus, Abby, 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 Mark. It is his voice in my ear, and I said his name again, but only gurgled, wheezing, came forth. It feels like I'm aging in decades with every shaky breath I take, and a heaviness started to settle onto my chest, causing me to quiver in both anxiety and fear. Ooh, I tried to spare, but a groan was all I could manage. Everything seemed to hurt worse than before. What is this? Why can't I stop crying? Can he see me crying? Mark, please help me. It hurts so much. Don't worrying of. I'll call 911. I felt the warmth of human skin on my face, giving me a brief reprieve from all the hurt, but it was gone like dew in the sun. I didn't want it to leave. I wish I could open my eyes. I wish I hadn't been so full of habit, jogging every morning before dawn, and just had stayed home in bed warm and with him. I wish. God, I'm just filled with wishes today. I try to laugh, but my chest caved in, and something wet and serious dribbled from my lips. A little sleep. I just need a little sleep to forget the pain for a moment. Just a little, a quick frigid numbness enveloped my body, shaking me from a dreamless sleep. I timidly opened my eyes only to encounter a blackness so unnatural that it gripped me in terror, and I shut my eyes once again, this time not Washington, intending them to open. I couldn't move. My body was heavy, like stone, and I shivered as I could feel the blackness wrapping around me. It was making small sound. What are those sounds? It doesn't sound like Mark ... No ... that isn't Mark. Oh God, that's not Mark. God, what is that? I could breathe easier now, but the heaviness was still there, and the pain wouldn't leave. Those sounds, oh God, those sounds were getting closer. Mark, please, Mark, where are you? Abby. I stopped breathing, and I could feel a force trying to pry my eyes open, but I didn't want them to. Don't stop, please, please. The darkness in my eyes was safe, but if I opened them now, it wouldn't leave. Those sounds, that voice that my name slithered out from, would be there, waiting for me in greedy glee. Abby, my dear, open your eyes. Let us see you. The force was becoming stronger, the chill invading my bones, cracking them, and spreading twinges of pain throughout my body, and my eyelids were being controlled by something that smelled of some heinous gas that my mind couldn't put a word to, like something dead and kicking. We want you to see us. Scream. I wanted to scream, but if I opened my mouth, it would get inside. It would crawl in like ants and stick to my bones, my heart, my veins, clogging me up with black spikes, their appendages pricking me like needles as they rushed inside, and their mouths eating and starving, eating and starving, and never stopping. My eyelids slowly widened, a blizzard breeze crashing into them, blowing away all the moist tears. Abby, my dear, my eyes opened wide. We can see you, Abby, I screamed as my eyes opened, and I struggled as its hands pushed me down. Off, off, off. My voice was croaky, throat on fire and chest squeezing for air. And then in my line of sight, warm hands grabbed my face, and Mark's green eyes came into view. Mark, he said, a relieved smile coming on to his worn face. He looked like he hasn't slept in days time, I said, but my voice sounded inhuman, and I looked around waiting to see it lurking in the crevices of the SMA Lines room. But there was nothing but white walls and a woman in a suit gazing down at me in relief. Mom, baby, my mom stroked my arm that I realized was in a cast, and I looked at Mark, his eyes bright and wet. I saw it, I whispered, and he furrowed his brows. What? So what a BS, you've been in a coma for 3 days, baby. I didn't feel him stroke my face as his were disprocessed in my head. The pain was there, hazy, but there, and so was the sense of reality, the smell of disinfectant and cleanliness, the sound of an erratic heart beating uncoordinated, the brightness and their warmth. Tears escaped, head from my eyes, and I gripped the fabric of his shirt that smelled of him, and nodded. I'm alive, I said, and they both nodded along with me, and I could feel reality taking a firm grip in my head. We can see you, I snapped my head to the side, and you can see us. Story 6, Survival Guide. We've all been there. You have just gone to a certain place at a certain I'm on a certain date, done a special thing, and the thing you suspected would happen has just fucking happened. Not to mention the fact that you've just seen whatever the fuck it is that lives in your mirror, been to load in detail how you're going to die, and the highly demonic and invincible thing you summon is heading toward you. Also, your family are all dead, your friends are all missing, and you're being framed by someone with access to your bedroom. What the fuck do you do now, sweet protagonist? Well, you've come to the right place to find out. These are the simple rules one saint follow in order to firstly not become the victim of creepypasta, and furthermore to come out kicking if the worst does happen. With the help of this guide, you can be the catatonic, traumatized wreck as opposed to the guy currently being worn as a coat by some dude who roams a lot. Just keep these simple rules in mind. 1. Mirrors and darkness don't mix. 2. Actually, mirrors are a general nitrogen monoxide. In creepypasta world, there is nothing more sinister. 3. There is zero chance of survival if you look the thing that no one else can see or answer its question incorrectly. 4. If you are alone tonight in a creepy mental institution, take some time to consider what the fuck are you doing there. Then, if it is appropriate to do so, leave. 5. Avoid going to places where everyone else who went there never came back or died inexplicably. 6. If someone stops your vehicle at night and asks to come with you, it would probably be in your best interest to politely decline. 7. Killing is the last method of survival. Use it sparingly but without fear. 8. Whose phone is always a good thing to ponder. Also, who the hell answers a phone while kissing a dead person's sexy daughter? Douches who. 9. Get a simple .38 revolver. Load it with 2 silver bullets. If you really feel there is no chance to come alive out of a situation, take one shot at whatever's threatening you. If this doesn't work, you still have the last shot to become an hero with 10. Area 51 is simply too well guarded to let you get in, or to let any alien out. 11. When going to a hotel, try to steer clear of unauthorized areas. If you couldn't resist, but you saw a red thing, take some time to consider the price range and hotel standard on your next visit. Have you ever stayed at a haunted H. Hilton? 12. When booking your hotel stay, TripAdvisor can be an invaluable tool in deeming whether your choice is the scene of a multiple murder, full of dead people. Built at the mouth of lines, local newspapers can also be helpful. 13. Invoking demons, speaking weird languages, and performing rituals of any kind is considered dangerous. Refrain from doing that, especially around abandoned warehouses, churches, psychiatric institutions, forests, and your house in front of a mirror at night. 14. When going to a new area, environmental understanding is a key to survival. Ask around for cursed places, legends, dangers, and other details. Listen to the local people's advice, and don't be afraid to ask if you're unsure of which attacks, disappearances are paranormal and which aren't. 15. Always have a Bible next to your bed. Provides average reading material, proof of beliefs, and a really heavy object to throw at enemies. 16. Don't count on holy water. Get a sturdy vial of sulfuric acid and let a priest consecrate it. 17. Japanese priests cleanse rooms by waving katana swords around. Their ritual is 100% effective on corporeal forms. 18. If you find 66 messages on your phone, mailbox, email, etc., consider changing the said service provider. Also, don't bother reading the messages. It's spam, extra-dimensional, possibly spam nevertheless. 19. Old pharmaceutical companies can't help you unless you specifically need blood of the innocent, snake-oiled, and radioactive syrup, which never. 20. If you need to sign it in blood, you do not need to sign it. All mainstream governing bodies will accept contracts signed in ink. Bear this in mind if offered deals that seem too good to be true. 21. Lighthouses are dangerous. Avoid them at all costs. If you work at a lighthouse, consider a career in insurance sales or veterinary care. 22. There is simply no reason to listen to music that causes suicidal tendencies or to watch films that have had strange, disastrous consequences. 23. If you like to plan ahead and have some money, buy your auntie and uncle a house in Bel Air. Nothing can harm you there, no matter how scared your mother is. 24. Secret, secluded, untouched places in old buildings are left untouched for a reason. Pioneers never say die, but in fact they do have an unusually high mortality rate. 25. Before you start swimming in the ice-cold waters of a murky lake at the center of a dark forest at midnight, ask yourself, do you really want to travel to an ancient and terrifying city? If the answer is no, then stay at home instead and watch whatever quality programming is available on Cinemax. 26. On your 33rd birthday, try celebrating in a well-lit house with the company of others. 27. Refrain from using the one true name for anything. There is probably a reason people gave it a nick. 28. Watching TV static for long periods may be hazardous to your health. Why say light TV to combat this problem? 29. Get a cat. Those furry little hairballs seem to perceive unnatural phenomena better than us, and, if desperate, simply throw it at whatever is about to get you. 30. Cemeteries are bad places, especially in foggy conditions and on Halloween. 31. Try not to close your eyes ever. If you must, do so only briefly. 32. If you hear chanting, run until you are out of earshot. 33. If you are too old to play with dolls, you do not need to be anywhere near one of the creepy little fuckers. 34. Legends can offer valuable insight of where not to go camping. With friends. 35. When babysitting, ascertain the family's tastes and preferences to avoid being killed by poorly selected statues. 36. Even if you are certain that running will not save you, it is always best to try. Follow these simple rules and little or massive harm may befall you either way. The important thing is to make sure your tale is told, copied, and pasted repeatedly. 7. Hank. Think of a drop of dark red ink falling towards a sterile marble floor. It splashes into a crown and branches into threads of alternating lengths, ejecting droplets into the air, the droplets to skim across the floor, and eventually the drop is gone, the crown settles in the image of a shining sun, but red, like a plague of rash. The splatter brightens the red at the extremities while maintaining a thicker, darker core in the center. Imagine a face protruding from the core. Then imagine the shoulders emerging, arms, now chest. Stop. There it is. We call him Hank. He is an atypical contiguous single spore issue germinated by the colony scene surrounding him. Picture half a man implanted to the corner of a room, the blood vessels arcing out from beneath him like Brock, high, creeping and thinning as one zooms out. These are called forelegs, and although blood relatives, they compete with each other to wheedle nutrients from the parent pod as self-preserving NDV. Duels, coaxing, cajoling, seducing, and sometimes even drugging or coercing what in botanical terms would be the central xylem for their due. It is undying, it is highly resilient, and it is expensive. Growing the fungal colony has helped solve two maritime crises, save the African continent from an unending drought, and salvage 80% of the world's timber waste. The way it is grown is a complex duology. In the first part, a human being volunteers to submit bone marrow and other tissue samples to undergo advanced bioengineering. In the second, the engineered genetic isolate is cultured with plant matter. The setup for this is accomplished during the former stage, where the human samples are retrofitted with numerous enzymes coded to diffuse into the place ant substrate in the latter stage, making what's known among the scientific community as the green goo. The Petri dishes are let sit for 34 hours under intense monitoring for signs of germination. Once the initial polyp sprouts, the node is tested for blood vessel merger, maturation, and efficiency. After that, it is replanted in damp, carbohydrate-injected soil and left in the dark. Once this point is reached, the spore begins reproducing asexually with its own genetic information. The fusion of proteins involved in this process is analyzed monthly by 6,000 agriculture scientists and critics worldwide for unethical practices Debates are held bi-weekly to lay down ground rules and, to an extent, insurrect the first system to legally recognize undesired as scenarios. This way, the public could rest assured the life binding is continually filtered of any moral dilemmas. In one such debate, the vanishingly low probability event of a dominant human allele was suggested, although the splice is strained 232 times over to ensure passiveness. The human allele may sometimes emerge triumphant. Under the human influence, when two compatible, heterokaryotic four legs of the newly germinating pod compete, they may consider collective success a more viable option instead, thereby disengaging from the deathmatch and joining to form a larger dikaryotic four-leg, once an unsympathetic organism concerned solely with a net survival status. Its canny is dulled by an attitude of interdependence. Our social instinct causes this tweak in the symbiosis, and the resulting growth metastasizes, transcending a rather human psychology to a part of the whole colony. This part, if left unchecked, may form a fruiting body, that is Hank. Hank is sentient. The odds of these conditions aligning dwindle infinitesimally, shaking off 1 billion or so at each step. The extreme unlikelihood of the scenario caused it to be deemed theoretical and was dismissed with a to-be-revised prescription. It has taken Hank 2 years to grow into this office room. An initially captivated staff had to be cleared out by management after receiving a critical number of immutable reports of being deeply unsettled by the sight of a melting man. He started out in the unlit agroforestry vault just by the breezeway. Thirst is said to have been the motivator for the migration. The mechanics of a breadcrumb trail scenario charge the culprit. The water cooler on this floor sits a short walk away from the office area just before tea. Greenhouse employees are known to stagger along this route to and fro in pursuit and consumption of water, and the janitorial department reveal that the area was therefore subject to the most cleaning. In the same pursuit, Hank became the permanent and only occupant of office number 238. The blood vessels Hank's pod are the crop yield of this splice. They boast remedial properties Watt-hour, and processed into a serum and injected into the bloodstream due to their ability to distill a targeted molecule. By the same virtue, they can be utilized to retrieve the most nectar out of a flower for modesty. Example, some unorthodox methods, such as using the product as seasoning in food, have been reported to give enhanced results, but remain scientifically unverified. These are pros. They are the benefits the project was intended to produce. They are clear and loud, but the cons are even clearer, and by today's evening, probably just as loud. And they can be summed up with minimal simplification by the eponymous question. Hank does not talk, but he has been observed mumbling. His eyes barely open and seem to be milky white, indicating subpar vision capabilities. The ARS are deformed and functionless. Hank does not respond to auditory cues. His skull is doughy and inflates and deflates like a granule of maggots, seemingly in rhythmic discipline with his breathing, indicating the lungs share an inhospitable space with the brain. However, he has shown tremendous touch sensory competence, which is a note of both marvel and despondency for the world at large. A Senate hearing has been called to address the issue at once. The streets are flooded with rhetoric and judgments. The internet is riddled with support groups, fan pages, and pseudo-personality files based on what is known of Hank. They are going to cut him out in 3 hours, and somehow Hank seems to be clairvoyantly aware of his fate. He has grown restless, and the commodity on has only made his coping worse. Some are calling it a harvest, others are saying abortion. The question is, will Hank be euthanized, disposed of, the paperwork burn, the ledgers close, the history erased, the dilemma forgotten, the incident buried and piled on with minutiae and quibbles? Or will he become the first legal subhuman subject of scientific study to live in a glass box for years to come? What are we going to do with Hank?